Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 18th of December, and joining me on this limited edition, limited in which way, we'll let you decide, Assistant Editor Steve Withers.
Do you know that wasn't me?
And special guest Mark Botwright.
I'm standing by as you requested.
Welcome to the final podcast of the year. That's why it's limited in terms of, well, Ed's away doing something important. He wouldn't tell us what.
Let's be honest, we're all fairly limited.
Yeah, I think people had cottoned onto that, Mark. And the other Mark is, I don't know what he's doing. He's not here, though.
I have a sneaking suspicion he might be at a nativity play. Mm-hmm. That's what I reckon he's up to.
Okay, well, better him than me. That's all I can say on that one. So yes, it's the final podcast of the year. We are wrapping up. Today we've got an interview with Danny Tack from Philips. He's their picture guru guy, so we're going to interview him. It was recorded in advance. I will apologise in advance for the sound quality as well. We had a terrible hiss on the line and the audio quality wasn't great. I've spent about 4 or 5 hours trying to get it sounding as good as I can, and you can now hear what's going on. So I do apologise for the limited bandwidth on the interview, but it is interesting. Danny's got some interesting things to say, so we're going to come on to that in a sec. But first, it's current competitions, and Mark's going to tell us all about it.
Yep, you can win one of 2 Kit Sound Voice One speakers with Alexa, and that one runs till the 12th of January. And you can also win a Blue Sound Node 2 worth £499, courtesy of Sevenoaks, and that one closes on the 15th of January.
And Mark, do we have any previous competition winners?
Yes, we do, for once. Muljow won an Inconvenient sequel on DVD. Frostrich won War for the Planet of the Apes on Blu-ray. Lowman's 100 won Conor McGregor Notorious on Blu-ray.
Is that Conor or Colin?
It could be either. I think it's Conor McGregor. Metalhead Pete won the Dream Screen TV backlighting set, and Wild Child 22 won the MiView C330 dashcam. Can you tell I've got my glasses on this week?
Yep,
yes.
You can tell that. And we've only got this little part to do this week, so that's you done till the end now, isn't it?
See you later.
And moving on to hardware, instead of reviews and news for our final podcast before the festive period, we have a special guest. Joining us is Philips TV picture guru Danny Tack. Welcome to the podcast, Danny.
Good morning, Phil and Steve.
Philips held a comparison event, a shootout, recently in London at the London Film Museum, where they had the Blonde exhibition, and that was for our forum members. You invited along around about 30 members. Now that that's passed and you've had time to digest things, how did the evening go for you, and did you achieve everything you wanted to?
Yes, I was actually very excited at the end of that evening. We wanted to test how our P5 picture processing, our new picture quality engine, was doing compared to competition. And the result was better than I expected. I thought we would be the best in the vivid mode, where the maximum of the picture processing of the P5 picture processing was working. But the end result, the preference score in that vivid mode was much better than I expected. 68% it was. But even on top of that, before that, testing the TVs in the calibrated mode and also winning that calibrated mode was for me a really surprise, gave me a good feeling at the end of the evening.
Of course, people are going to be sceptical of the results being a Philips event held by Philips and the Philips TV's the winner. You can see where some of the comments are coming from on the threads and so on. But can we just settle the question of the vivid mode demonstration? Now, we were not telling people to watch their TV in vivid mode, but the reason it was done in this comparison was that the manufacturers all set their TVs in vivid for shop floor environment. So they set their TVs up to be the most eye-catching with all the video processing running. And you wanted to show off your processing against these.
That's correct. So we have many more picture modes in our TVs, as there are natural mode, there is a calibrated mode, there is the movie mode, many other modes to watch TV in. For me, it was I really wanted to see how we would score in shops, and that's then the vivid mode, or for consumers that also like to have everything that vivid, brilliant, sharp, most contrastful. They could use that mode, but not necessarily.
Danny, the calibrated modes show how a TV should be set up for movie content and how the director intended. And obviously it's what calibration's all about. And on the night, we had all 4 OLED TVs looking as identical as we could, which is basically the point of that, and as expected. But for you personally, do you watch in calibrated modes, or are you more personal preference?
I'm a bit more into more vivid than the calibrated mode, as I also watch TV many times at home with a lot of lights around me, so not very, very dark, and that's why I would prefer a bit more vivid than the calibrated mode, but not necessarily the maximum.
Steve, it's interesting hearing Danny's thoughts on that, and as we always bang on and on about calibration on the forums and directors' intent when it comes to films and TV drama. So, in your opinion, as our TV reviewer these days, is there scope to experiment with picture quality with other sources?
I think it's more the latter, that there is a degree of scope when it comes to watching films. A lot of people do struggle with things like judder, and judder is inherent in the way that film is captured. So I understand if someone wants to perhaps use some motion enhancing features when they're watching film or film-based content, be that movies or TV dramas. However, I do personally believe that in terms of brightness, black levels, and obviously the color accuracy and the grayscale and the color of white, that should be as the content creators intended. So you should be following the standards. However, as you say, Phil, when you're moving on things like video-based content, so watching things like football, whilst the standards do still apply, there is a more latitude there, I think, for using certain picture enhancements in order to get a more enjoyable experience, particularly with things like football, where there's a lot of fast movement on the screen, people running around on the pitch, the camera moving up and down across the pitch. I think there definitely is value that can be added from these processing features. But personally, as a purist, when it comes to movies and film-based TV dramas, I would be more the calibrated end of the scale than the sort of the processing end of the scale.
Okay, so before we go to the forum questions submitted by our members, Danny, we have been talking about the positives of OLED technology, but do you see any areas where there are weaknesses, and what would you like to see improve as we move forward?
Now, there's actually only one weakness in OLED, and that's the general light output. And as we were just discussing, when we're talking about calibrated mode and as the director intended, and actually even there is maybe no weakness in OLED, as the light output that OLED can make for that kind of calibrated modes is good enough. It's back to my point on getting it as vivid as possible, and as Steve is also adding to that, it might be interesting for football matches or any other sports kind of programs to look a little bit beyond the calibrated mode there than the weakness of light output, very bright pictures. That's where OLED is a bit weak in. Not in the peaks, so it can easily make, or actually make as the best, a twinkling star sky with in darkness. That's where the peaks performance is coming to his senses. But having like a snow landscape, very bright, this is where OLED is a bit weak, and this is where manufacturers of OLED panels they recognize that point, and they are going to work on that to year by year gradually increase the light output, which is at this moment around 150 nits for a full white picture, compared to an LCD, which is generally like a standard 400 to 500 nit. You see, it's still quite a step to do, but manufacturers will work on that one.
Of course, some people would even say that the dynamic range on OLED is already outperforming LED LCD TVs.
That's what I was saying, Phil. So the peak performance is much better than LCD, and peak performance is about having the brightest brights on small objects compared to really black is black. So this is where OLED is superior. But when you are looking to your vacation pictures in bright, sunny daylight, or like I mentioned, the example of watching a ski program where you have the whole screen is all over in white and there is no black, which is the strength of OLED, then you see the weakness of OLED. But then again, not all pictures, of course, are all the time full white, so we shouldn't exaggerate also in that matter. If you take an average picture content, even very bright, you're talking roughly around then 200 to 250 nit maximum, with the full white light output specification of OLED being 150, you're then not too far off. So for your average pictures, you will not see, you will not suffer too much. But for exceptional programs like snow and ski and that kind of stuff, you might see a difference when you have those TVs side by side, for instance, like in shops, or next to LCD.
Yeah, well, something we always talk about these days, we talk about 4K a lot and even full HD, but a lot of people do still watch a lot of standard definition channels on their TV. And one question that I see a lot in the review threads is, why do SD channels look worse on 4K TVs than they do on full HD TVs? So, Danny, perhaps you might be able to explain your theory behind that. And also, do you think the P5 processor can make this better?
Yeah, definitely that last thing. Because it's quite a general statement or question, and I would say it all depends on how good your picture processing is behind that 4K TV compared to that Full HD TV. Of course, because the 4K TV, okay, the resolution of the display is indeed much higher, and so any imperfection in that SD channel might be amplified and be shown better. That's why you need, first of all, for those SD channels, which are generally not the best source quality in the field, you need to have like good source perfection features, which is the new element in the P5. So we have things like analog noise reduction, but I would call it advanced analog noise reduction. We have, for the digital SD channels, we have MPEG artifact reduction. We have what we call smart bit enhancement for avoiding quantization. All those measures are important to make the source, the SD channel, first of all, clean from the source point of view. And then we have, in our P5 picture processing, we have what we call ultra resolution upscaling and detail enhancer to come to the maximum benefit of your 4K television. But in general, if you compare 4K TVs with P5 picture processing side by side to a Full HD TV, I would say still then I would prefer that 4K TV. So it boils down to bring your 4K TV, but also equip it with the right picture processing behind in terms of source perfection and sharpness enhancement stuff, and then you will become better than your Full HD TVs.
So moving on to question 2, and this is one that we get asked all the time, and that's screen burn and image retention on an OLED TV. Certainly in the days of plasma TV technology, it was an issue, and that's a very similar emissive technology, and you could actually cause damage with permanent screen burn on a plasma TV. Now, with OLED, it is a concern of many viewers, and certainly image retention is an issue seen by some. Screen burn is very, very rare. So do you see this as a major issue, and what do you do as a company to combat such things?
Well, first of all, I understand your point of comparing to plasma, but where with plasma it could lead to damage which could not be corrected. With OLED, it's different. Even if you have what we call image retention, image sticking, it's always possible to solve that, to get rid of it again. The way we do it in our Philips TVs is there's one item in the picture menu which is called clear image residual, which is something, so it's an action which you can start as a consumer any time of the day, any moment, whenever you feel the need for it, whenever you see something is all of a sudden sticking into your image which is not supposed to be there. So a manual action. If you are not, let's say, the advanced user, and you feel not comfortable of doing that, we also have taken measures in our product that after every 4 hours of operating time, the TV will, the first time after those 4 hours are exceeded, and TV goes to standby, then he will start such a cleaning process to trigger the anti-aging of the screen. That takes about 6 minutes, and well, if you are not putting your TV into standby after you have been watching it, then the first moment you're taking it out of or starting it up again, you will get as a consumer a question to activate the procedure, and if you don't do that, then again he will re-ask for the question a couple 10 hours later, and so in that respect we're putting in measures enough towards the consumer to clean up his screen if the need would be to do that.
So I guess the follow-up question has to be, what is it that particularly causes image retention on an OLED TV?
It's a basic, it's, as you say, it is an emissive technology, and for instance, if you have like logos in certain channels, you're watching a channel with a logo sitting there in the corner all the time, well, those pixels, those phosphors at those points will be they will be operating much more than the others, and therefore have a temporary permanent effect, you could say. What we're doing with this anti-aging program is we're having like a washing machine kind of thing. We're constantly refreshing pictures all the time and getting those phosphors again to their standard neutral level again.
So would you say that having the TV in a calibrated mode would cause less image retention than having it in vivid mode and overdriving the panel?
If you're watching in a calibrated mode, you will suffer much less from this problem.
So if a Philips TV customer suffers from really bad image retention or, heaven forbid, burn-in, what would be your company's approach to warranty?
Well, I don't think we come to that point, because I have now experienced very severe image retention on our TVs, playing all the time with our products during development phases, and I have so far never had a situation where, with those two measures I was talking about, that we cannot solve the issue.
Danny, you mentioned aging there briefly in your previous answer, and that's something I think that people are concerned about as well, because obviously OLED is still a new technology. It hasn't been around that long, and there's been talk in the past about, I think particularly blue, aging faster than the other two colours within the TV. I know these TVs use white, blue, green and red, to create the image. But is there a problem with OLED pixels aging, and could that affect your picture over time?
Well, the answer is no. There is no problem because the OLED screens have been tested severely before coming onto the market, and they are guaranteed to do their 50,000 hours lifetime, just like this has been the standard for LCD TVs. So in that respect, we are reaching the specification level. As you say, there is the weakness in OLED is the blue one, and still is, and it will probably always be the most critical one. But the lifetime of 50,000 hours is guaranteed.
Okay. The next question is a bit technical, so bear with me. But one of the readers has asked: have Philips solved the issue of trailing halo and edge degradation of centrally tracked objects over a panning background with motion control enabled? In other words, I think what they mean is with football and things like that, where you've got balls moving backwards and forwards across the pitch. How effective is the processing in terms of tracking those particular objects?
Well, indeed, let's first tackle the motion artifact problem from doing the motion compensation processing, which you generally find back into movie modes when people are walking in front of a very detailed background. We all know a halo artifact then appears around the person. We as Philips have always been trying to avoid that problem as much as possible. I think also succeeded in that of giving the consumer motion judder removed performance with the lowest level of halos. Actually, this year with the P5 picture processing, we have even improved on that. We kept the level of the motion of the halo around the object the same level as before, which is better in competition. But we gave now again sharper background performance. So all in all, you get a sharper picture and not more halo artifact when it comes to a movie where you try to avoid the judder. That's on the judder part. When you are watching football and watching, for instance, a ball and the halo behind the ball, this comes from motion blur. We know that OLED is very good on his motion sharpness, or better than the LCD, because OLED is a technology, as we already said, an emissive technology, meaning we do not have the liquid crystal like in an LCD TV, so we do not have the speed or the slowness of switching of the liquid crystal. That problem is not there, and therefore OLED is then on sharper in motion, meaning that the ball from football will have a sharper impression. To give you an idea, when you have a motion problem, which is 100%, 30% of that problem comes from LCD switching time, which is not there in OLED, and so it's already 30% better than in the LCD.
Danny, sample and hold is an issue of OLED TVs for motion, and we'd like to see improvements with motion without adding in soap opera effect, which obviously ruins the look of film. So what have you been working on in terms of motion with your OLED and with the P5 processor, and where do you see technology like black frame insertion helping, if at all?
Yeah, well, P5 is picture processing, which is mainly dealing with the sources. So that's why I say P5 is most active in removing judder. But in respect to motion sharpness, motion blur, there it's more about how do you deal in the display in the OLED screen. And here, well, first of all, let me repeat that OLED is, in terms of motion blur, much better than the current all LCDs, even the most high-end LCDs. OLED is that 30% better, which I was just talking about. Still, there is a what we call a sample and hold motion problem, which would be the remaining other 70% of the motion problem. Now, to solve that one, black field insertion, which I think was mentioned by one of your or by more than one reader, could be a potential solution, but not at this moment, because black field insertion it would create two other problems. One is it would create a flicker, and the second one is it would even reduce the light output of the OLED, which already earlier I said is not the strongest, or is maybe the most weak point of OLED. Why do I say flicker? Because all OLED screens currently are 100 Hz screens, but if you would start to inserting every field a black field, then you're actually going down from 100 Hz refresh rate to 50, and 50 Hz we know is flickering. That's why in the old days, very long time ago, we went from 50 Hz to 100 Hz CRT TVs to avoid flicker. So black field insertion is at this moment not the solution to improve motion blur. If in the future we could go up to from 100 Hz on OLED's refresh rate to 200 Hz, then doing black field insertion would not cause flicker, because then you would end up even inserting black field at 100 Hz, which is not flickering. But also I think we need to do that at the moment the light output becomes a bit more robust in OLED. Both of those things are being under investigation. I think it's about taking the right moment to do that. But also it has to be said that this is primarily something to be done by the panel supplier. This would probably fit more into the panel chip rather than into the V5 picture processing chip which we have now developed from Philips.
Danny, will Philips be adding dynamic metadata HDR to your TVs? And if so, will you be using Dolby Vision or HDR10 Plus?
We are currently investigating HDR10 Plus. It's a bit too early to commit to say we're going to go for it or it's going to be in all our products. The plan, the ambition we have is that our 2K18 range, so our next year's TV range, will have HDR10 Plus, but it's today just a little bit too early to confirm that this is going to be the situation.
Is there any particular reason why you're looking at HDR10 Plus rather than Dolby Vision?
Oh yeah, there's a very simple reason. HDR10 Plus is again continuing on the open standard of HDR10. HDR10 Plus will remain an open standard. Will handle the dynamic metadata just like Dolby Vision, but in an open standard environment, and that has our preference.
There's a lot of content out there at the moment on disc and streaming services which is in Dolby Vision, but nothing so far in HDR10 Plus. So is that a concern for you that there's a lack of content?
Well, you're right. There is indeed with Dolby Vision there is content, but as there is now a alliance formed between Samsung, Panasonic, and Amazon, I'm pretty confident that also content will become available. And as with the existence of at this moment the HDR10 and Dolby Vision. At this moment, also, consumers never had to miss any content, any HDR content, although they only had HDR10. So I'm staying confident that that will remain the same with as soon as the HDR10 Plus standard is becoming active.
Danny, about a decade ago, you launched a very exciting product for us AVForums members, and that was a 21:9 TV. Now, there were a few issues back then with the way that the sets had to accept video material and the video processing used, and it had to zoom and so on. But is it a possibility that we might see 21:9 TVs making a comeback now that the technology is so much better these days?
Definitely the first point, would we like to bring back 21:9? I think the answer is yes. The big thing is to find a partner to do that with. As you were mentioning, the product we have been launching in the past, that was done together with a sharp display supplier, because you need a screen for that. So you need display suppliers receptive to the idea of 21:9. And at this moment, the appetite from the display industry is not so big. The only screens in 21:9 available are now currently the very, very big LCD screens, be it 98-inch, both from LG and Samsung in their LCD technology. And on the other side, the smaller gaming monitors, but then you're talking like 24-inch and below. Between everything in between that, it looks like display manufacturers were trying out other stuffs like curved, which is now probably going to come to an end. Other kind of things they've tried. So maybe there's time again to put that on the agenda with the display suppliers again to see if that they would be receptive to make the screen sizes that matter to the consumer. So it is not so much do we want it as Philips, it's more can we make a business case together with the display suppliers to so they come up with the screens. The other one, the other problem you were talking about was about converting 4:3 content and 61:9 content into the 21:9 format. I think by now 4:3 is almost disappeared, and the majority is now 21:9, of which a big majority is also 21:9, where so the black bars into 16:9 container. But for those matters, we have been improving the conversions from 16:9 to 21:9, and that should not be a showstopper anymore.
Obviously, given the growth of streaming services and disc formats, do you think it would be easier now to talk to content providers and get 21:9 material delivered to a screen so you didn't need to zoom or use video processing features to make it work?
I think it's going to be a chicken and an egg story. So you will have to first show to those content providers that the screens will come, and then they probably can take precautions for that format. But it's going to be a discussion which is not after one round a done deal.
Okay, well, it's encouraging that Philips are still thinking about 21:9 TV technology, and I guess we'll wait to see if anything happens with that in the future. And the final forum questions were about the video clip that you showed at the shootout event, which was involving the SWAT team and the panning clips across the buildings and so on. And the question is, would you be able to make that available to the forum members?
I'm sorry, I have to say no, because as strange it may sound, this was a movie we made a couple of years back, and a couple is more than two. It's almost 10 years, I think, now back we've made that movie, and by now the rights of that movie, the copyrights are expired. I was using it in that environment, which was a bit of a closed environment in London. But if I now make it available to everybody on the forum, then I'm afraid that some of the talent in that might get back to me, and I might get into discussions with them.
Okay, that's understandable. Thanks very much, Danny. And with CES about to happen once again in a few weeks, which we're all excited about, and we're going to see what the latest and greatest is in TV. What's the one thing that you're really looking forward to, either this year, after Christmas, or in the future?
Well, I'm very much looking forward to, but that's not for Christmas now, but in the longer future, but can be near future, and that would be for me 8K.
I guess that's interesting and surprising, because I mean, we are struggling right now to get native 4K content on our brand new, native 4K screen. So where do you see the 8K content coming from?
That's true, but we've been struggling all the time, and it has never prevented us from bringing a higher resolution. We know that from a consumer point of view. I've been doing regular tests with consumers, asking what they find important within in the picture, and their number one element is we want to see pin sharp pictures. Now, how do you achieve pin sharp pictures? That's by bringing in more resolution, and basically. This is something the industry has been recognizing, like the display industry moved from VGA resolution into Full HD resolution, now into 4K, and that will not stop them. They will continue in going to 8K. Source industry did the same, but as you say, source industry is a little bit behind the display industry. This should not be a problem. Actually, I see it even as an opportunity, because I already was mentioning in this cast that things like ultra resolution upscaling and detail enhancer are features within our P5 picture processing, which are actually dealing with lower resolution sources, upscaling them to higher resolution screens. So you're right. We are suffering at this moment, while the majority of TVs now in the industry is becoming 4K, but we're suffering by not having the real 4K sources. But still, 4K is booming. 4K TVs are booming. So I see nothing. I don't see it different for 8K now. So the 8K can come. With the 4K resolution sources we will have like the same job as upscaling Full HD to 4K. It's about the same step, but for then the majority of sources being the Full HD, you'll need a bit more clever picture processing, which you probably can find back later in our next version of P5.
I guess one of the technical issues, and it's interesting we're talking about 8K, and that's limitations we'll have with screen sizes. I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult to get that many pixels into a 55-inch screen, and I would guess sitting at a normal seating distance, are you going to be able to see any increase in resolution?
You're right, Phil. In that respect, 8K is the biggest benefit you will get from 8K will come from 75-inch and up, where I think the sweet spot screen size for a 4K TV, I would say, is between 55 and 65-inch. I would say for 8K it will become like 85-inch. Sorry. Going lower, there's going to be also a benefit. It will be smaller, and depending on how close you're sitting to that screen, that can even make a difference. The benefit will come from bigger screen sizes. You're right.
one thing, Danny, which is the thing I'm most excited about in terms of future tech over the next couple of years, is actually higher frame rate. I think that adds more immediate value to viewers than maybe just a higher resolution would, and will probably be slightly easier to deliver. And given that you obviously are an expert in processing and it's something you're really into, I'm surprised that you aren't more excited about the idea of being able to use higher frame rates, native higher frame rates for content, especially things like sport, where it becomes so valuable.
Well, I'm not against it, and I do see that if you from the source can natively increase refresh rate. I do recognize and acknowledge that the performance, both in motion sharpness, but in less motion judder artifacts, will become better. On the other hand, you could say, well, it will take for us some opportunities away where we can, or not opportunities, but things where we can differentiate from competitors in our picture processing. But I'm not against this. I mean, we should never block progress in technology because you're losing a differentiator. We will find other things to do. So I recognize this can be a big step forward in terms of motion blur and motion judder performance. But this is definitely something that the source industry have to do. They have to make that step.
Danny, it's been great having you on the podcast. So thanks for your time today. Have a great Christmas. And we're looking forward to seeing all your new TVs in the new year.
Thank you very much, Phil and Stephen. And I wish also all your readers very well Christmas.
So moving on to movie news, obviously there's only one film to talk about, and just want to tell you now that we are going to review The Last Jedi, and we're doing this spoiler free on this occasion, so it's not going to be as long as we want it to be. We're not going to go into the details that we really want to get into because it will spoil it. We'll do that in January. That gives everybody that wants to see it plenty opportunity to go and see it, and we'll also do it at the end of the podcast. So if you don't want any spoilers on that edition, you can switch off, and then me and Steve and whoever else has seen it by then can go off on a rant, because that's basically what we're going to do today. This is probably the most disappointing Star Wars experience I've had at the cinema, and it's for a number of reasons, and I guess we just get stuck right into this one, Steve, don't we? And we try and do it without spoilers. So basically my summary of The Last Jedi spoiler free is I'm going to have to use an analogy, otherwise you get into spoilers. So my analogy of The Last Jedi is you're going on holiday to visit your uncle. He lives on the same street as you, but the end of the street. So he's about 30 or 40 doors along the road, but it's the same street. You have 3 bags of luggage and some spending money, and the trip should take you about 15 minutes. You finally reach your destination 12 hours later, having lost 2 of your bags and all your money. And you're left wondering, what the hell just happened? Who just mugged you? And where do you go from here? That's basically my summary. Meanwhile, you're also told that somebody's been following you the whole time, but for some reason their transport is just that little bit slower, and
we're getting close to spoilers here, aren't we?
And not in tune with real physics, so it never quite manages to catch up with you. The end. Now, what are you going to do with that, JJ?
I do think JJ has got a bit of a problem. Maybe that other director left because he thought, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to follow this. Because by the end, you're kind of thinking, okay, where do we go from here? Because, God, this is hard without saying anything. Basically, the film is, for those of us who complained that The Force Awakens was a bit too derivative Star Wars, and having watched it again just before I went to go and see The Last Jedi, yes, it is definitely a greatest hits package. However, it is a hugely entertaining greatest hits package. It doesn't have, it's got a breathless pace. It's witty. It's fun. Yes, it's familiar in many ways, but I think it was meant to be that way. It does set up a lot of questions that it doesn't answer, but also ultimately found it a rewarding experience, even if it does have that kind of cliffhanger ending.
What my first question was going to be about this film, which is it an original Star Wars story that kind of dovetails with it, more like, say, Rogue One, or is it that kind of almost like a Star Wars cover version as The Force Awakens was? Because that was kind of one of my criticisms with The Force Awakens, which was there was so much that just seemed to be transposed from general Star Wars tropes straight onto it, that if you were to watch them in sequence, you would have thought, this is a bit weird. We've been here before, haven't we?
Well, obviously Lucas got out of jail with that one because you once said it's poetry and it all rhymes and things should mirror what's happened in the past and what happens in the future and so on. And yeah, they've kept that there. My analogy, I'll read the first part of my analogy again because this should answer the question for you. You're going on holiday to visit your uncle. He lives at the end of the street, same street as you, 30 or 40 doors along, so you're not going to go very far. It just takes a hell of a long time to get there. And on the way, you lose a hell of a lot of stuff. And you think, I've just been mugged here.
Yeah. For those of you who I know what I was going to say, which is that The Force Awakens is quite derivative. And clearly, Rian Johnson set out to do something very different. He thought, I'm not going to, do what they accused JJ of. I'm going to make a film that's not, derivative of Star Wars. Having said that, if you look at the film and think, well, hang on a minute. Okay, so let's look at The Empire Strikes Back. So we've got a big land battle involving walkers on a white planet. Tick. Jedi training. Tick. 2 parallel storylines. Tick. A shifty new character whose allegiances are questionable. Tick. Basically, yes, it does mirror The Empire Strikes Back quite closely, despite the fact that it's meant to be so different. It does do some things differently. Unfortunately, the things that it tries to do differently really, really piss me off.
And don't make any sense whatsoever.
No. The whole plot, let's go, there's 2 parallel plots, and it's not difficult to work out what they are. One involves Luke and Rey on the island, training. And the other one is a military subplot involving the Resistance and the First Order. I'm 2 films into this series. I still have no idea who the First Order are, where they came from, who supports them, who funds them, what the Republic is, where it's gone, and who the Resistance are and how they relate to the Republic. None of that is ever explained in either of the films, in honesty, so I've still got no idea. But it's basically a subplot involving the Empire, the First Order, trying to destroy the Resistance and what's left of it.
If they explain all that, though, prior to the third film in a crawl, that crawl is going to be a hell of a long time.
It's going to be quite a long one, yeah. 2 hours. Yeah. Well, all right. A film opens with a very exciting, intense sequence. And after that, it goes downhill fast.
Yeah. I'll use another analogy. You're going to hate my analogies for this. It's a bit like a McDonald's. Somebody mentioned this in one of the threads I was reading on AVForums, and it worked, but I'm going to add on to it. So they said it fills a gap, but it's forgettable. I would actually say that it's like a McDonald's in the fact that it fills a gap, but actually a few hours later you get the trots, and you realise that it's actually been half cooked. All the ingredients are there, it just hasn't been put together properly, and you're now suffering.
Yeah. It's really, I found it to be a very unrewarding,
what really
unfulfilling experience.
Is it still focused, though? Here's my question: is it still focused on kind of like family issues? Because at one point in The Force Awakens, it did kind of feel a bit like kind of Jeremy Kyle in space kind of thing.
Well, I guess the best way to explain this...
Star Wars daddy issue.
Best way to explain this is everything that they built up in The Force Awakens, Rian Johnson just throws it away.
Yeah, with really sort of cheap jokes, basically, half the time.
Plus there's a lot of
answers. You're not going to get any, or at least you're not going to get the answers that you're going to find.
Yeah. Plus, when has a Star Wars story or a Star Wars film ever had morality tales within it and hit you over the head with stuff like that? This really pissed me off. There's a whole bit in there that says you shouldn't eat meat, and it's almost James Cameron like in the way that it knocks you over the head with that. It then tells
Did Morrissey do the score for this one?
It then I'm coming on to the score. Don't worry, the score doesn't get away either. Right, so morality tales. Don't eat meat is basically what this film says. It also says look deeper at what's going on around you, and the flag posts that up straight away. Respect leadership. And don't second guess a woman is another morality side that they're trying to push here. And the last bit is all big companies and corporations are evil, and that's in a fucking Disney movie.
Yeah, that one was a bit hard to take.
Okay, there's some excellent stuff in there. It's The Empire Strikes Back greatest hits when it comes to the movie score by John Williams. Every movie music cue from that movie is in this film. The overuse of the well-known themes, what should be emotional is no longer emotional. It's like a greatest hits package on repeat. So you could be listening to Spotify while you're watching the film. There's about half an hour of this movie that is truly outstanding. And this is all the good bits put together. Comes to about half an hour of truly outstanding action effects. Strong acting. There's some really, really good acting in this. There's also some absolutely terrible acting, but we'll come on to that. There's some real gravitas in there as well. There's actually some emotional in there, and there's some good drama. The other 2 hours of the film is made up of paper-thin plot, questionable motivation, really poor acting from some of the new guys in this. It's like, really? You got some really questionable motivation from certain characters. You got characters that are in this film, and you're thinking, why are you here? What is your motivation? What is your use? You're just here to make up the numbers. It eventually jumps the shark for me in one particular scene.
So is this the kind of thing, though, that, should we say, many years later, someone will come up with a fan edit that might rectify some of these issues, or can you not edit around?
There is a whole middle section and subplot that you could take out of this movie, and you would never know it had been there, and it would be a far tighter movie.
Yeah, there is that section, isn't there, that basically you could cut out very easily, and it would make absolutely no difference to the overall dramatic drive of the narrative, would it?
Yep. The other thing is, he changes the rules, and this is the one thing, this is the one unforgivable thing for me, is that after 40 years of this lore, of the rules of this universe, of this galaxy, he breaks the rules. He completely changes one of the major things in this film, in this series of films, for a plot device. And that's when it jumps the shark, absolutely, for me. It's like, you do not tamper with this, and he goes there and he tampers it, and it does things that in no other movie has anybody done this. But you've got 40 years of this rule being in the movies. Lucas played about with it, but he only played about with it because he named the midichlorians. He didn't mess with anything else. Rian Johnson... Yeah,
he kind of tweaked it occasionally along the way and said JJ.
But a little bit. But Rian Johnson jumps the shark with it. Absolutely jumps the shark with it.
Johnson jumps the shark quite early in the film. By the end of the film, he's jumped a whale, in my opinion.
Yeah, basically.
I'll use an analogy since you're using analogies. Basically, with The Force Awakens, there was a lot of setup, a lot of smoke and mirrors, a mystery, and then once all the smoke had cleared, what we're left with is a tattered magician with a dead pigeon up its sleeve. Because this just... I walked out and thought, I genuinely have no interest in seeing this a second time. I genuinely have no interest in what happens in this story anymore. I genuinely don't care. And for someone like me to walk out of a cinema thinking that is quite profound, because, I've been a Star Wars fan since I was 10. See, that's 40 years of this. And I walked out and thought, I really, really don't get that. I just didn't enjoy it. But like you say, there were bits in it that were absolutely superb, but there were bits in it that I found unacceptable.
Yeah, totally unacceptable. You do not mess with 40 years of that. That was the one thing for me, and I just thought, no, sorry, you don't do that. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. You've now completely changed the rules. You've completely changed the way that this universe works, and you have, like you say, jumped the shark, jumped the whale. And he does it twice in this movie, like you say. We're not going to go into spoilers, but he does it twice. And I guess what we have now is, like the 99 debacle, we now have post The Last Jedi in our lives. Because as a Star Wars fan, it's all changed for me. That's the moment where it's changed.
So where do you rate this in terms of the overall scale of Star Wars films? Are we talking in line with The Phantom Menace? Are we talking... I
would say The Phantom Menace, for all its issues with...
It's more of a Star Wars film.
Yeah, it's more of a Star Wars film. With all its issues of Jar Jar and some humour, and this film suffers from that as well. There's some real slapstick humour, but the problem is you're dealing with issues of real gravitas one minute, and then you almost have a fart joke the next. And tonally, it's just all over the place. It just does not work tonally. And, there are your moments, and Bond does this, and other big movie stars do it, where there is the time for the smart little quip. Or the little bit of humour. This film starts on a scene where it's almost parody. The conversation that is had is parody, and it doesn't belong in a Star Wars film because
it's more like a scene out of The Family Guy, wasn't it, or something?
Exactly. You don't have phones in space, so that whole gag doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because there are no phones in Star Wars. There never have been any phones in Star Wars. So that whole premise, that whole joke, falls flat in its face because it doesn't make any sense. It was
full of anachronistic, glib humour, the kind of thing that Joss Whedon actually does quite well. Whereas The Force Awakens was full of really witty banter and likeable characters and charm. This film had forced humour, cheap jokes, slapstick, and anachronisms. I mean, for example, at one point a character says, and this really pissed me off because I just thought this just took me completely out of the film. A character says, "Godspeed." Yeah. At no point ever has the concept of God been mentioned in a Star Wars film? Star Wars is the only religion ever talked about in Star Wars is the concept of the Force. So why didn't she just say, "May the Force be with you"? I know there's a joke earlier in the film where one of the characters says, "I've said that a lot," but that was anachronistic. It was unnecessary. And it took me out of the film. And there was lots of gags like that.
Yeah, and the whole morality thing as well. Like I said, it was James Cameron-esque the way they were forcing that down your throat. I mean, there was a humorous scene with Chewie. It should have been humorous, but actually it made that character out to be something that was really quite nasty. And it was like, hang on a minute, tonally that just doesn't make any sense. It's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster.
Does it at least have some decent kind of space battles and that kind of thing? It
does. It absolutely does. The Millennium Falcon, my God, you get to see the Falcon at its best. There is some absolutely brilliant action in there. Fight choreography is superb. Again, I'm not going to go into spoilers, but there's certain scenes in here where it's Star Wars. It's absolutely brilliant. It works. It's fantastic. But like I say, when you add all that together, you get about half an hour of the film.
Is there more of a sense though of, say, like kind of inertia and weight to the ships? Because that was one thing that I always found a little bit weird in The Force Awakens. It seemed like all the ships could kind of turn on a sixpence and it can just do whatever. You know?
Yeah. Gravity and vacuums and all, it only works when the story wants it to work. In other cases, there's a whole section of this film where you just think, well, the laws of physics apply to this. Your story just falls apart because it makes no sense whatsoever. It's sloppy. It's hard to fathom because there is so much good in there when it comes to fight choreography, when it comes to space battles, when it comes to the action, when the action's needed, and when things go on. It's really good. It's edge of your seat stuff. The effects are outstanding. The soundtrack was amazing. The sound mix was, in the theatre I saw it in, phenomenal. But
although some of the effects are a bit ropey. I'm thinking particularly of the Mary Poppins scene.
Yeah. But, this is what I mean. There's like half an hour of absolutely knocking it out the park, Rian Johnson. You're doing a great job. And then you've got the other 2 hours, which is like, it's inconsistent, it's full of, absolutely rigged with plot holes. But there's some really nice characters in there. There is a nice character in there who is Han Solo Type 2. Absolutely. No, I'm not going to say Type 2, they'll think he's got diabetes. There is a Han Solo character. I mean, going back to the real Han Solo, who was a bit of a nasty person and who was looking after himself, and he's in there. I would love to have seen more of him. I'd love to have had him to have had more of an... What happens is there's a huge plot hole that doesn't make any sense for that character, which, again, is disappointing. It's like it's sloppy. It's...
But can they at least learn from this? Can they at least take some of these criticisms and rectify it and, say, bring that character to the fore in the third film or something? Can they kind of bring it back from here?
It's not going to be easy.
It depends what...
Silence is damning.
Well, it does, and it depends what Supreme Leader Kathleen Kennedy says, basically, because this has got her fingerprints all over it. But at the same time, I mean, they are absolutely bigging up him, and they've given him a new trilogy and all the rest of it. If that's the way they're going, me as a Star Wars fan, it died with...
So you're not even going to use your unlimited card to give it a second chance, maybe?
No.
I'm going to go and see it again, just to make sure that it is a turkey.
I'll go and see it in Dolby Vision and Dolby Cinema in Vegas, maybe with Phil when we get to CES. But I've got no interest. I mean, it's been announced already. Well, it hasn't been announced already, but all the retailers are already listing it. So it's coming out on 4K Blu-ray in, I guess it would be about April time, March, April. I'll get that. But the 4K DI, so it'll look and sound stunning. But
I'm a big
done,
believer.
Really.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that your first impressions on anything, on people, on films, on music, and so on, you get a few seconds to make an impression. With films, you give it a bit more. With Star Wars fan, I went in there. I'd already lowered my expectations because I missed out on the midnight screening because it was just too icy for me to go out. And to get back in the car at 3:30 in the morning in that kind of weather, I was just asking for trouble. So I didn't go at midnight. I went 4 p.m. the next day, so 16 hours after Steve saw it. But I'd already read Steve's review. I'd already seen the threads on the forums. I didn't read any of the spoiler stuff, but I read what people have been saying, and it was really mixed. So I'd actually lowered my expectations going into it on the back of that. and I'd had a brief conversation with Steve, but nothing in detail. And even with the lower expectations, it was just, yeah, it is what it is. We can't change it. So certainly for me, I'll look in on the Solo movie. I was always going to do that. I'll look in with what else it is. But for me, it's a sense of waste. And without getting into spoilers again, there's so many opportunities that they had open to them. And it just feels like, for whatever reason, and I really don't understand it, but it's almost like Rian Johnson hated everything that J.J. Abrams had set up and just thought, well, to hell with it, I'm going to completely spoil everything. And look at all these sad fanboys on the internet forums and stuff talking about who are Rey's parents and who's this and what's his motivation and all that. I'm just going to crap all over that.
So kind of almost like kind of rebelling against the idea of just having like a checklist of things, or, you know.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm all for change. I wanted to see Star Wars go certain directions. I want to see character development. I want to see real motivation there. I want to see darker subplots and all the rest of it. And people on threads are saying, well, you got your change. No, we didn't get change. We got a really poorly made movie with some really poor choices and some really poor acting and plot holes that really don't make any sense, and a story doesn't make any sense, and a second storyline that doesn't go anywhere. It literally does not go anywhere. I'll come back to my analogy. You're going on holiday at your uncle's house. He lives at the end of the street. That's how far you're going to move in this universe throughout the whole of this film. And there's
in fact, we see all of 2 planets, don't we?
Yeah, and what annoyed me with The Force Awakens is they used the same set twice. That always sticks with me. You know, you've got the forest when it's green, and you've got the forest covered in snow. It's the same location, the same thing. That always knocked with me. The thing with this is you go to places that you really don't want to go to in this movie. It makes no sense plot-wise. They're putting it on the screen just for the sake of selling some toys. You kind of forgive that a little bit with the porgs and that kind of thing, because they didn't really make a big difference to the story, but at the same time they weren't that offensive. You know what I mean? So, yeah, whatever. But you really do... slapstick humour, it just doesn't work.
Also, the production design on Canto Bight was very prequel-esque. I just felt it looked like a cutscene from the prequels, actually. In fact, a lot of it, the whole sequence, the production design, the look of it, the comedy, the whole thing just felt very like it had been taken straight out of the prequels. And it just felt wrong, given the very physical and real world that, kind of that used universe that JJ had got back to in The Force Awakens. And to a certain extent, that is carried through in this film. But this film has a lot more sets that look very Star Trek-y and prequel-esque and too clean and tidy. And although they still rely heavily on physical effects and physical makeup effects and animatronics, it just felt like the bastard child of the original trilogy and the prequels.
Yeah, and your goodwill had gone by the third act, because there's a scene in the third act that should have really tugged at the heartstrings. It should really have been emotional and all the rest of it. And by the end, it was like, oh, what the whatever. I'm so angry. And I'm angry because I wanted it to progress and I wanted it to be different. I wanted it to be it can't be a completely different Star Wars film, because, like I say, it has to stick to the rules. He bent the rules, he broke the rules, he made things up for this film to move the plot along, which completely, seriously impacts on everything that's gone before. There's characters in this that they should have been killed off a long time ago, because they've no place in this film. There's no motivation. They don't need to be there. They're only there for the sake of, I don't know why they're there. And these morality stuff, where don't eat meat and respect leadership and, be careful of big companies and corporations. You don't need any of that crap in a Star Wars film. There's never been in a Star Wars film before. You don't need it now. And I'm sorry, but there's a tag-on scene, and you can tell it's a tag-on scene right at the end of this film. Again, it's like a jump in the shark. It's like he's almost preaching to you that hope lives in the hearts of millions of people throughout the galaxy. You don't need to tell me that. I've had 40 years of Star Wars. I know what the Force is. I know what hope is. I know what the rebellion is. I don't need it spelt out to me, Ryan. Thank you very much. That last bit was like, oh, off.
Yeah, I really hated that last bit. Do you know why I'm annoyed? Because at the end of it, I came out of the cinema and thought, that was a bit disappointing. But as the more I thought about it over, I mean, if I'd been writing the review now rather than at 4 a.m. on Thursday morning, it would be a very, very more savage review. But I'm annoyed because now I've got nothing left to look forward to as far as Star Wars goes. I don't care anymore. I'm not looking forward to Episode 9. I'm definitely not looking forward to Solo. I'm just not looking forward to anything anymore. So they've robbed me of that pleasure, and that's annoying.
I feel like I have been trolled by Star Wars in my childhood. That's how I feel. He's trolled me, absolutely. He's killed all enthusiasm off that.
You sound very much... Did you ever see that? You watched the sitcom Space, didn't you?
Yep.
Yeah, it was a bit...
The bit where he's burning all of his Star Wars stuff after seeing The Phantom Menace.
Well, that's what it's like. It's and maybe it's a case of I'm 43, Steve's 60. Maybe it's just a case of we're just old men now, and it's not for us; it's for the kids. But I don't buy that argument at all because it's just a really poorly made movie. Some real poor choices, some really, really naff storyline, and there's almost like 2 hours of filler in here. I don't get the self-congratulatory Lucasfilm. Oh, this guy's a great director and all the rest of it. Bollocks! It's a really poorly made movie. There's half an hour of really good stuff.
Let's be honest about it. The plot's not very good. There isn't much of a plot to this film. I'm not going to because it would be a spoiler, but I could actually condense it. Well, you've just done it as an analogy, but I can condense the plot into a few words. There is nothing really happens from the beginning to the end. Not much has happened.
It's like it's like that Delimitri song, isn't it? Nothing ever happens. Nothing happens at all. The needle returns to the start of the song.
I'll tell you what it reminded me of a lot is the 5th Harry Potter book / film, The Order of the Phoenix. That book is a massive long book. At the beginning, Voldemort's back, but no one believes Harry. At the end, Voldemort's back and everyone believes Harry. That's the plot of that entire book. I've just presented it. You could do something very similar to the plot of The Last Jedi. Nothing really happens in it by the end. And you're thinking, well, you've set all this stuff up in The Force Awakens. You had so many places you could go and interesting plots and plot twists and developments, and you didn't do any of it. You just lobbed it all away for a few cheap jokes. It
sounds like the kind of film that's kind of primed, ready for an honest trailers.
Oh, yes. I tell you what, I cannot wait for the honest trailers. I'm hoping that the feedback on the internet is landing on ears that are listening at Lucasfilm. I really do hope.
To be honest, Phil. But I just think it's too. I just don't see how you're going to get yourself in the narrative hole that Rian Johnson just stuck them in.
Yeah.
And I think it would be reflected in the box office. I think it will do very well opening weekend. This weekend it will pull in 200 million in the US.
Well, I mean, you say that there was,
but it's not going to get repeat viewing.
I was in a 250 seat cinema yesterday. There was 15 of us in there, and that was 4:30 after.
So it was up to 4 on a Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, 4:30 on a Thursday afternoon after the schools have come out. So you would have thought that it would have been the first sort of showing that the school kids would have been at, wouldn't you?
I think
and there was like 15 people there.
You won't get repeat viewing. If I'm not going back and you're not going back, then no one's going back.
Normally, I would be I'd be online booking another showing now for this afternoon. That's not going to happen.
I saw The Force Awakens and Rogue One 3 times each at the cinema.
Yeah, so on that disappointing note. Are you going to go and see it, Mark?
I strangely enough, I have no real wish to now.
Well, I hope that's not the case. I hope you do go and see it, because there are some comments on the forums. There are people who really enjoyed this film. There are people who liked it, who are saying, well, it's just a Star Wars film, whatever, I quite enjoyed it, I'm going to go and see it again. So, there is a definite split there. But for me, it's just a poorly made movie. It's poor choices, poorly made, some really baffling decision making, and there's half an hour of absolutely brilliant Star Wars in here. There really is. Some of the battle scenes, some of the stuff that happens, it's like, yes, get in there. And then it goes on to a silly, stupid, bloody joke, and then we get back to this storyline that's not going anywhere. The decisions that have been made making this film mean that the next one, good luck, JJ.
Yeah, talk about poison chalice.
Yeah, so that's The Last Jedi.
So what would you give it out of 10 then, Phil?
5.
5. Yeah, I gave it 7. In fact, every year I've done the same thing. I've always given it, like I gave The Force Awakens and Rogue One 9s out of 10 in my cinema reviews, but I would have probably downgraded that to 8s after further consideration later on, or second viewings. In this one I gave it a 7, but after further consideration, I probably would have downgraded that to 6.
We'll get it on 4K Blu-ray, and there'll be certain scenes that we go to and we'll watch, and the rest will get forgotten about and never viewed again. So there'll be like half an hour of good stuff, and the other 2 hours totally and utterly forgettable. Rian Johnson, stay away from Star Wars. Anyway, moving on. Quentin Tarantino wants to make an R-rated Star Trek movie. So we keep saying we want things to move on. We wanted Star Wars to move on in a different direction. They took it in a direction which we really disliked. Why not ruin Star Trek as well, or has it already been ruined?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as big a Star Trek fan, although I quite enjoyed the last Star Trek movie, Star Trek Beyond. I thought it was fun. I know Tarantino is a huge Star Trek fan, so he certainly knows the universe and all the mythos around it. So,
yeah,
no question.
Allegedly, the same is true of Ryan.
Yeah, quite. And obviously, they've already dropped the F-bomb in Star Trek Discovery, so is that such a big deal now?
I've got to say, we haven't discussed it in many of the podcasts, so let's discuss it in the last, very, very quickly, in the last podcast of the year. Absolutely loved Discovery. I think it's been great so far. It's been really fresh, different, not Star Trek, really. And where I'm up to in the series, I'm really quite enjoying it at the minute.
Yeah, no, I did enjoy. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a Star Trek fan, so I'm not like all the fanboys are going, "Oh, this is terrible. This isn't canon. This is different." Couldn't care less. Actually, thought it was a really fun series. It looks great. Production values are cinema quality. Dolby Vision on Netflix and everything like that. It looks and sounds fantastic. Really enjoyed it. Actually, thought it was great.
I'm afraid I've still not got round to watching it yet.
There's not much point in you being on this podcast, Mark, if you don't watch anything or do anything or have anything to do with AV.
I bet he reads the competitions and he does it well. So,
thank you.
Right, so that interesting. It's something we'll definitely come back to in January because we'll be desperate for content in January. So we'll cover Quentin Tarantino again. We're going to do the spoiler edition of The Last Jedi as well in January. We're going to give you plenty of time to see it, and then we're really going to rip it. And
Christ,
plus,
I can't imagine what the running time for that's going to be.
And the plus point to that is everybody will have seen it by then. Hopefully, we'll have seen it at least a couple of times by then if we get to see it at the Dolby Theatre in Vegas. So, and we'll have had more time to digest it. And who knows, maybe the tide will turn a little bit, or maybe Rian Johnson really will be the devil in all our eyes. We'll come back to that one. The last sort of things that we really need to cover for this week is films opening this Friday. So if people should really avoid Star Wars, Jumanji's actually looking quite entertaining now.
That looks fun. I'm actually quite looking forward to that. It looks like it's going to be fun. And I should be well up for Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle. And obviously, if you're a Pitch Perfect fan, there's a third film of that. And I know that's very popular amongst... bizarrely, Kaz is going to see it. Apparently, he quite enjoyed the first two, and he's up for the third one. So, there's a couple of interesting films coming out that I think will be good antidotes to those of us who have got force fatigue, and I'm suffering from that quite badly right now.
Force fatigue, that is definitely what it is. Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle. It looks entertaining and fun. It'll be naff. There'll be some terrible jokes in there, but what's the running time on this one, Steve? Hopefully it's nice and slick.
It's going to be a tight sub 2 hours, isn't it?
Yeah, hopefully. So it should be good fun. Right, so the Nolans are bringing out a collection. Oh, sorry, that's the Nolan collection. I was wondering why we're talking about the Nolan sisters. So this looks like one hell of a collection. I'm tempted. It's just I'd rather spend the money on car parts at the minute.
Yeah. Well, basically, there's a big Ultra HD Blu-ray release coming out this week, which is the Christopher Nolan collection. So it's not all of his films, but it is the majority of his films. It includes the 3 Batman movies, Interstellar, Inception, The Prestige, and, of course, Dunkirk, which is getting its first release on any format. That comes out on Blu-ray as well. All these films have been completely remastered, 4K DIs, and from what I've seen from advanced reviews, absolutely stunning picture quality. I've got my issues with certain, a bit like Rian Johnson. I think Nolan has a tendency to think he's cleverer than he actually is. Having said that, he has made some great films. I do enjoy Inception. I enjoyed The Dark Knight immensely, and I thought that Dunkirk was great. And Prestige is a fantastic film if you haven't seen it. So there's some good stuff in there.
How much?
That's coming out. Well, actually, it's interesting. As far as I can work out, there is no actual box set coming out in the UK. There is one coming out in the States and in some other territories. In the UK, there's no box set, so you have to just buy the films. There's a 3-disc set of the Dark Knight movies, and then there's the 4 other films. So it's about 25 quid a pop. So what's that going to be? 150 to 175 quid to get the lot. So not cheap, granted. He's definitely one of those guys who knows about picture quality. He shoots on film and obviously on IMAX and 65mm as well in certain cases. And I think they should look absolutely stunning. So that otherwise it's a pretty quiet week disc-wise. There's an interesting documentary called In My Mind about the making of The Prisoner, more about Patrick McGowan really, which actually is fascinating, really interesting insight into him, worth checking out if you're a fan of both. And also Billy Wilder's The Apartment, which is a brilliant film. If you haven't seen it, it's really, really good. And that's also coming out on Blu-ray and a special edition.
Okay, so that's this coming out, and finally, talking about big corporations, Disney just seem to be buying up everything at the minute. They have just bought 21st Century Fox, which includes 20th Century Fox Film Studios,
company, isn't it?
for 52 point something billion. The point, I think it's
$52.4 billion.
Yeah, you can give me the 0.4 if you want. You can keep the 52. Yeah, that's a hell of a lot of money for basically the big studio, but there's other things that goes with it as well on the corporate side and so on. But it's a hell of a lot of money to be paying out. They must see some value in it. I mean, that's definitely more than what they paid for the Star Wars franchise.
Yeah, I mean, but obviously they do get distribution rights to Star Wars. They get distribution rights to the first 6 Star Wars films. They get Star Wars, which was still owned by 20th Century Fox because they're the studio that actually made that film. So they get that back. That's going to be, I think, in the long run, that's probably good news for Star Wars fans because you might get something out of this. Obviously, they get back the Fantastic Four and X-Men, which are Marvel properties, so they can bring those into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think that's a big reason for doing this because there's a few billion of box office there alone, just in a couple of good Marvel movies there. They also get Avatar 2, 3, and 4, which are in the pipeline. I'm not so sure this is going to be as successful as the previous Avatar, but there's a lot of money being spent on it and a lot of anticipation that they'll do good box office. So they've got stuff in the pipeline at Fox.
I think you'd be surprised how many people still love the original Avatar. We might not like it, but there are still a hell of a lot of people out there who did go mad for it.
It was a long time ago, was it? 2009. I mean, it's nearly a decade.
Then they also get is it just a controlling stake in Hulu, or is it?
No, they get Hulu.
Oh, right, all of it.
Yeah, so they're obviously going to do. They're going to compete with Netflix now as a streaming service.
A streaming service that has, if they had all Disney and Fox films exclusive to it, that would be a hell of a platform.
Yeah, definitely. It's a huge deal and makes Disney. I mean, I'm amazed. It'd be interesting to see what the antitrust laws in the US, how they deal with this, because it is creating an absolute behemoth in terms of entertainment, isn't it? In terms of movies and TV and everything, just huge. But I think if you're a fan of Star Wars or Marvel, it's probably quite good news.
Is this the kind of deal that's going to raise the chances of us getting an unadulterated release of the original trilogy?
Possibility. I mean, who knows? It's entirely up to Lucasfilm, isn't it? They now control everything. So if they want to, they can. It's whether they want to. I'm guessing
everything.
Yeah, more ways than one. I'm assuming that their current schedule is already planned out. So they've got Solo coming out in May, and then there is a gap there after that until the end of 2019, which is when episode 9 comes out. So there's an opportunity for them to do something in the run up to episode 9, possibly. To re-release the original Star Wars movies at the cinema. I mean, it's just money for a rope, isn't it? They're going to coin it in, so why not? And
can you imagine if they made that exclusive to a streaming service?
Yeah, they better not. Well, hopefully they'll do some nice 4K discs opportunity there. They've got 4K.
No,
they did 4K restorations.
They're a big corporation. They'll find ways of getting money out of you in multiple ways. If there was one thing I've learnt from the Last Jedi, big corporations are bad.
Are you giving up meat as well?
I'm a hell. I'm actually going to go and eat more now that Star Wars just tried to tell me to be a vegan.
Seems a strange thing to say in the run-up to Christmas.
Yeah.
They just made Chewie out to be a really bad person. They didn't have to do that. Poor Chewie. Who, again, was criminally underused in this.
As usual, yeah.
Sorry.
Leave it. About The Last Jedi.
Yeah, leave it. Walk away. Just walk away. I think it's time to say Merry Christmas, everybody. Have a great New Year. Thank you very much for listening this year to the podcast. So yes, we'll be back on the 22nd of January. Mr. Botwright won't be on that podcast. I can tell you that right now because it's the CES special. So you can come on and read the competitions if you like, Mark.
F*** off.
And on that bombshell, Christ, this bleep machine's been put to really good use this week. My thanks to Steve Withers.
Make 10 men feel like 100, or in our case, 2 feel like 3.
And Mark Botwright.
Godspeed.
Oh, Steve won't like that one. Well done. Like I say, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for the latest reviews, news and videos, and of course leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for listening in 2017. Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in 2018 when we're back from CES.